us, you can even approach me and ask questions so I can tell you a little bit about the ritual. I think we already discussed it here during the general meeting. And I also made a video that you can find on Facebook where I explain a little bit what is the Tulu Tula Voca is. I'm going to let Omowale speak. Do you want? I think you have some announcement also for the group.
Yeah, peace family. This is Brother Omowale, the Vice Shanuti of AI Philly. We have two events that I'm currently assisting with. One, so as the co-chair of the youth committee, we have an event that's coming up next Saturday, July the 11th, that's starting, I believe, at 12 p.m. The event starts, and it's called Healing from Police Trauma at Home and Abroad. And this is an event that is for our young people, ages 13 to 18, to really just have a private space where they can discuss what they see happening around the globe right now, because this issue of police trauma is not something that is central to life in America. It's something for us as African people that is central to life wherever we are. So we want to make sure that we globalize the conversation around that and allow our young people to connect and have those healing discussions in a safe environment. So that's going to be on the 11th of July, next Saturday at 12 p.m. If you have a young person who is ages 13 to 18 and you would like them to attend, you can reach out to us by email at victory@aiphilly.org and let us know, and we'll make it so that they can be there. Once again, this is a private event. It is not being publicly promoted. So if you would like someone in your family, maybe a daughter, a niece, a cousin who's between those ages of 13 to 18 to join the discussion, please let us know. The second thing, the RBG Centennial Conference. We've been planning behind the scenes for this conference for about the last month now. So the date for the conference is set on August the 8th and August the 9th of 2020. So that's a Saturday and Sunday. We actually closed the ability for people to submit proposals this past Friday, and we received more than 50 workshop proposals on a wide range of topics. The theme for the conference is Garveyism and the Renewed Cry for African Nationhood. So the website will be live this week. I think that if we can get it up tomorrow, we will, but it'll be live by July the 8th at the latest. So there will be more details coming on that. So Sister Wahida, our Director of Communications, will be sending you all internal communications as to A, how you can register, but B, how you can help to promote this event online. But again, it's very important. 100 years celebrating the red, black, and green. We are a Garveyite organization. We're a Pan-African organization. So if you're here at our meetings, we assume that you subscribe and to and uphold those particular values. So definitely support this event, and there'll be more information coming soon.
All right. Thank you, Brother Moale. Thank you again for the excellent work that you do in the RGB Sentinel. I look into it, and I mean, it's amazing. It's gonna be a great event, and please tune in for the website. It's gonna be great. You can have more information. Next person here who's gonna maybe do some announcements is Lydia online?
She's going to be running a little late. She sent a text message.
Okay.
But the main announcement that she had was, and I don't know if you already spoke to it, but the Tutti Tubaluka, I think you already spoke to that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that was the main announcement she was going to give today.
All right. What about, okay, Tata, are you online?
Absolutely. Hold up, everyone. Just a quick update regarding the financials of the organization. July 7th, we will be collecting Q3 membership dues. So we certainly appreciate and if you're able to get those payments to us by that time. Also, if you would like to submit donations just to the chapter in general or towards the RBG Centennial, since there are a lot of expenses for that, we certainly will accept those. And via Cash App, that's the easiest way to send any donations. And our cash tag is AI Philly. Also, if you need any additional information concerning membership dues or other ways that you can make donations to us, you can contact me at treasurer@aiphilly.org. Thanks for all of your support.
All right. Thanks. Anything regarding the finance committee that you'd like to communicate to member? You need more people to join the committee, or any work you are working on that you want to update to the general members?
Nothing public. Any specific announcements concerning the finance committee, I'll follow up with those individuals directly.
All right, perfect. Tristan, do you have anything, any announcement? Tristan? Maybe he's mute.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute. No announcements on my end. Sorry.
All right. Brother Maurice, are you on the line?
Yeah, peace, family. This is Brother Maurice, outreach coordinator. I just have a couple things. Just to let everyone know, we still have the partnership with Peace Park. If anyone knows of any elderly that's in need of produce, you can still email me. Also, there may be opportunities for us to, partner with Peace Park and go out on the land right there, 22nd Jefferson Street, to help, care for the land. The whole idea is for us to kind of get an idea of how they do their work, and perhaps at one point we can also have our piece of land, and we can kind of, have an idea on how to care for the land. Also, for the RBG Centennial, I like to, see if anyone out there knows of any Black businesses that may be able to help sponsor the event. You can also email me, or you can also call me on at 267-584-3672, 267-584-3672. You can reach out to me, and I'll reach out to those businesses. Maybe they can help us out to be a sponsor for the RBG Centennial. Also, if you want to be a part of the outreach committee, hospitality committee, we do meet every second Wednesday at 7 p.m. via Zoom for right now. You can also reach out for me if you want to get involved. We are going to be at some point going back to the Institute, and we need help in putting something together when we all come back to the Institute and celebrate the reopening. That's all I have, Brother Shadidi. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Maurice. Okay. Did you know? All right. I hope I didn't forget, but Wawa, I know you have.
Hotep family, I hope you're all doing well, staying healthy. I'm gonna do some quick communications related, and since Sister Lydia is not here, just remind people of aligned holidays coming up. So next general membership meeting, we have, I believe, guest Errol Henderson, correct, speaking on a topic. We do have Circle of Life at the end of the month, so make sure you join. Make sure you're following us on our Instagram at AI_Philly. Shanudi will be discussing, I believe, cycles and time in relation to spirituality. We also have an AWO podcast this evening at 8 p.m. So if you want to follow that, that is this evening, right?
No,
I don't know if we've ever confirmed that.
not at all.
Oh, okay. I thought that last week we were confirming for this week, but if not, then okay. We also have coming up the important aligned holidays as well. The RBG, as mentioned, is the 8th and 9th. You do have on August 13th, RBG flag, the RBG day. August 17th is Nana Marcus Garvey's birthday. We do have African Liberation Day that is around the corner coming up on August the 1st. And then separately, we are unsure if you're aware, if you haven't heard yet, AI Philly is working on a very heavy documentary in relation to the Germantown Potter's Field burial site and the ancestors that are there. There will be a private ceremony held there to honor the ancestors and so forth. So that will be coming up, and we will allow or extend anyone who's part of just membership. If you are interested in coming, we will let you know. That date is to be determined when we will be able to get onto that field. So once that information is made available to us, we will definitely extend that invite out to you. But again, that's just a private, small ceremony that will be conducted on the Potter's Field. So we'll definitely be sure to keep you in the loop. And then in terms of the RBG 100, Brother Omwale and I will be having a discussion in terms of some more communications related aspects of that. As he mentioned, they've been planning for about the last month. We would like to see the support of our membership and supporters of AI Philly make a video with using the hashtag RBG100 just to talk to us about, just joining in on the conversation leading up to the event about what the RBG flag means to you and what Nana Marcus Garvey means to you as well, or the significance of the RBG flag and Nana Marcus Garvey. So we'll definitely send out more information in the upcoming days for you guys to, if you'd like to join, show some support for the event. That would be greatly appreciated. That's all I have right now. I do want to apologize if anyone is listening in. There were some technical difficulties in terms of the link that was sent out in the newsletter. So we had to create a new link. I do apologize about it. Anyway, take care, be safe. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Wawa.
Just one last thing, Snooty, just for housekeeping, for the purposes of today's discussion, the only 3 people that will have their videos on are Brother Asar, Brother Zach, and Brother Tristan, who will serve as moderator. So I'm asking everyone else just that we keep our videos off during the discussion. Also, for the RBG event, if you are not on our email listserv, I just dropped the link so that you can sign up to our mailing list. The link is in the chat for everyone. Please do just make sure your email is there so that you can receive daily communications about the RBG conference once we go live this week. All right.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks again, Brother Moale. All right. So, okay. So this is the moment that you all were waiting. So I'm going to have Brother Tristan to present the 2 guests that we have. Not really guests. They like honorary members and regular members who would like to have a great discussion. But again, I just want to reiterate, please donate to AI Philly, like your money counts. Freedom is not free, really. It costs money a little bit. So in order for us to properly organize, we need your support as members, as participants to the general meeting. We don't ask for much. It can be $1, it can be $2, but it's really important that you participate in what we're building as a group of people. The time is asking for it. So, Brother Tristan, you have the floor. I'm going to take a step back, and I will just see you later when it comes to closing the meeting. Thank you, Brother Tristan.
All right. Hotep family. So just for those who don't know, so I'm Tristan Samuels. I'm the Secretary General of the Philly chapter of AI. And today, I'm just really excited, so I'm going to try to be concise. So today, we're having a discussion about this issue of objectivity. Is objectivity the African way? And I think this is something that we are always, as African thinkers, people in the community, things we're always debating about. What does it mean to be reasonable, but in a way that reflects us so that, we're not imitating Eurasian behaviors? So I think it's a very important conversation. And I think we have two very good brothers discussing this topic, who I'm both happy to call friends and colleagues at the same time. So on one end, we have Asari Imhotep, who I was called a master Pan-African linguist, but I know his specialty is historical comparative linguistics, really reconstructing the way African languages work and reorganizing the way we understand how African languages come to be. Very important scholarship. Then in the next corner, we have Zach Brooks, colleague and friend of mine in the Africology department at Temple with Karat and Dr. Asante, who specializes on Pan-Africanism and Afrocentric epistemology, and social media's antagonism towards African thought. So like, when, you have like liberal whiners, oh, you're a hotep, and those kinds of phenomena and that stuff like that. So I want to say, anything else we should know about you before we continue this debate? Because I'm very excited, so I probably missed something. Brother Asar, I covered you pretty good. Anything you want to add? Good? Zach, you good? Oh, unmute yourself, Zach.
Oh yeah, I'm fine. I mean, yeah, PhD student at Temple University, Department of Africology with you. That's it.
Oh yeah. Forgot the let. I always forget.
Sorry.
All right.
You're muted.
That's what happens when I'm ready. I just lose focus of everything else that's important. So the first thing I wanted to start off with, I don't know, I guess I'll go elders first. So sorry, you'll have to answer this question first. A question I want to ask to both of y'all is, what is objectivity to you? That is the first, and just no more than 5 minutes. I just want you to know, how do you, when someone's talking about objectivity, what do you think? So what is objectivity to you? So start with Brother to answer first.
Peace and blessings. Just want to say first and foremost, thank you and AI Philly for putting on this conversation and for having me as part of the conversation. Are you hearing a feedback?
Hey, maybe I should mute because I'm outside.
Okay, testing 1 2 3. That may be from you, Tristan.
Okay.
But, testing. Yeah, that's better. So as I was saying, peace and blessings to everyone. I'm very appreciative and honored to be here this day and to have this important conversation. And I know that everyone will get something from it, and the conversation will continue even after the video feed has stopped. And so I'd like to thank the ancestors, and again thank everyone who put this on. And so, as our good brother Tristan had mentioned, one of my specialties is in language. And so anytime that I want to have a discussion about a particular point, one of the first things that I do is define terms. And so I like to look at how words are being used today and their evolutionary path to see if we're still in alignment with what the term originally meant. So I'm going to share my screen real quick and let me know if I can see what is being shown. Does it show up correctly?
Yep, you good.
Okay.
You good. Yep.
So the question of today is essentially, is objectivity African? And my answer is hell yeah, it is African. And a lot of what I talk about, can be found in my latest text, Aluja, Volume 2, which was released in January. And so the word objective hosts a root object and is usually defined as a tangible thing or something perceived with or presented to the senses. It's from medieval Latin, objectum, thing put before the mind or sight. It's a noun use of a neuter term, a Latin term, objectus, lying before or opposite, of. From ob, in front of, towards, against, and iacere, to throw. from Proto-Indo-European root yea to throw to impel. Thus, an object is literally defined as that which presents itself to the sight. So what can be seen, it's a thing that can be seen and witnessed. So that's the literal term of an object. And so we have two suffixes in the word objectivity. So you have the suffix, you know, iv or ive. So when we say an objective, you know, which is a word forming element making adjectives from verbs, meaning to pertain to, tending to, doing, serving to do. And then iti, which is a word forming element making the abstract nouns from adjectives, meaning the condition or quality of being. So essentially, objectivity is the quality or state of that which presents itself to the sight. Therefore, of what's in front of you versus what's inside you, which you cannot see. And so it is from this etymology that we get the term and how it is used more so in science today. And so in Afrocentric literature, there seems to be kind of a misunderstanding of the role and origin of objectivity. And so, you know, of course, our elder, Dr. Molefe Kiti Asante, speaks about this, and Dr. Amo Mazama speaks about this quite frequently. And so there's a text edited by Dr. Amo Mazama called Africa in the 21st Century, Toward a New Future. And there's the chapter 1 is an article written by Dr. Molefe Asante called The Resurgence of the African World in the 21st Century. So in the section labeled An Afrocentric Ideology, Dr. Asante states, you know, an objective, objectivity, and universal are artificial categories which have little meaning in the real world because they equate by default to a collective European subjectivity supporting European particularisms. But then we have those, and I should say that the underlying implication is that the concept of object and objectivity is a European construct. And I disagree with that for a number of reasons. And I happen to be more so in alignment with Dr. Amos Wilson. So in a lecture which he did live on the 1st of September in 1994, dealing with the falsification of African history, Dr. Wilson states, we have been blessed then with the capacity to think and to reason and analyze and to deduct and to induct and abstract and conceptualize. This is as African as anything else we do. It is not a European form of thought. This kind of thing does not belong to white folk. It is a gift to African people as well. I don't care how Afrocentric somebody is. Don't let them come in here and tell you that to think analytically, to think abstractly and objectively is European and Eurocentric. It's not the mode of thinking that counts. It's what you use the thinking that counts. What you use the thinking for that counts. There's no sin in thinking abstractly. There's no sin in thinking conceptually. There's no sin in thinking objectively. The sin is in what you're using this stuff to achieve. If you're using it to damage African people, if you're using it to maintain the oppression of African people, then you're missing using it. And if you're misusing it, and if you're not using it as such that it maintains the oppression of, or it should be by, white people, you're also sinning. I don't care how spiritual you feel, okay? Because we are about more than spirituality. And what is spirituality anyway? In other words, he makes the argument that objectivity is in fact African, and I hope to demonstrate that in this conversation today. And so I have this, and this will be my last statement for this segment, that this is my fundamental argument, that in both the natural sciences and African spirituality, which I call kimoyo, they have two fundamental things in common. Therefore, they both attempt to obtain objective knowledge of reality by means of non-human entities. In the case of natural sciences, nature and its fundamental laws provide the objective means of the truth of reality. In the case of kimoyo, or African spirituality, knowledge comes directly from spirit, therefore non-human agents. And so this will be the central theme of what I'll be arguing today. And so I am done with that. So I hope that went there in 5 minutes.
Good. Right on time. Okay, good. So
Okay,
Zach,
you ready? What was? Can you repeat the question
yep, I
again?
can
Just so I make
say
sure.
something. Say like a section.
What are you saying?
Okay, I'll repeat the question again. You can hear me, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
I can.
good. What is objectivity to you?
Okay.
And 5 minutes tops.
Okay. Yeah. So objectivity, what it is to me, is it's a way of thinking. It's an epistemology. So to me, objectivity is something where someone is deliberately trying to present themselves as unbiased, neutral, or universal as they examine whatever it is that they're studying. So so it's a methodological approach. But the reason Dr. Asante, Dr. Mazama, many Afrocentrists, many African thinkers that are in a tradition of resistance have many issues with objectivity is because of the conceptual baggage that comes along with inheriting a way of thinking from Europeans. So for me, my understanding of objectivity, I wouldn't even call it objectivity. I'd use the term that Dr. Marimba Ani uses. She uses the word objectification. And basically she says that that way of thinking comes directly from Plato in Greece. And basically objectification is basically the idea that something can't be known unless it is objectified first, or so that fundamentally contradicts some of the I would say I guess you could say value systems within African culture, because we can't even discuss African culture without discussing African spirituality. And within that assumption, there is the assumption that everything is interconnected, interdependent, and inseparable. I mean, and it's manifested in different, everything, spirit is manifested in different aspects of our society. So everything has spirit, everything is interconnected. So the very process of objectification is alienating yourself from the way that your ancestors thought. And you're putting yourself in the same trajectory as in the same paradigm, rather, because objectivity operates as a paradigm. It's the cornerstone. It's really the pillar of Western modernity and of European thinking. It's the way they think. So I mean, you could look at a lot of their pejorative language and everything, and within their languages, the words they use as pejoratives always make people into objects. So in order to study people, they need to make people into objects. And that's why their disciplines have been so racist. And, within, I think did I go over 5 minutes? Like 1 more minute. So basically, I just want to go back to Dr. Marimba Ani's point. She has an essay, and it was in the Emotep Journal in 1990. It's called The Demystification of Objectivity. And what she does is she goes and she historicizes the origins of objectivity with Plato, how it functions, and how it even functions today in the university, because objectivity is really a compulsory paradigm throughout the university, in the humanities and in what people call the hard sciences. So the thing is, part of the Afrocentric project was trying to break out of the Eurocentric paradigm and create epistemological centeredness that we can use as our foundation to study ourselves. Because what's going on with objectivity is white people's history and culture is becoming invisible, and that's the basis from which, and their civilization is what we use to study ourselves and other people under the guise or under the veil of objectivity. So last statement, for all of the people, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, Dr. Amos Wilson, even Dr. Chancellor Williams, many of the people who are scientists and consider themselves to be scientists, they are not exempt from the conceptual incarceration that comes along with their education, or their miseducation sometimes, rather. I mean, people fight against it and they struggle with it, and that's what location theory within Afrocentricity is for us to sort that out. So I'll leave the rest for other open conversation.
All right, thank you. Okay, so that was pretty thorough. Okay, my second question, because I just wanted, because part of why I started with that first question, I want everybody listening to get a sense with how objectivity is understood by Asar, by Zach, because I think that's really important, because I find with conversations like these and many other conversations that we have, sometimes people are thinking or talking about two different things at the same time and don't even realize it. So that's why I really was insistent about that question. I'm very particular when it comes to definitions. So both of you kind of alluded to this, but I kind of want to hear more of your opinions on or perspective on this in a standalone. Is objectivity African? So that's the first, it's a two-parter. So is objectivity African? And based on your answer, what are the implications for African people? So if you're saying objectivity is African, what is the implication for our people? If you're saying it's not African, what is the implications for our people if it is not? And what if it is? More or less, does that make sense for both people? When I'm saying for Asar, Zach, does that make sense what I'm saying? Like what I'm asking, does the two-parter make sense?
It makes sense to me.
Okay, all right.
Is he there?
Does it make sense? Okay, all right. So who wants to start first? No, sorry, you want to go? Okay, all right.
Yeah. Okay. So make sure, because I hear a lot of the. There you go. Appreciate it. I guess I'll share my screen again, and I think there has to, even before that question is answered, we got to understand how we got here in the first place and why there's such a backlash. Because we got to understand that objectivity is a tool. It's part of the process of the natural sciences, and it is a tool, a paradigm, to be able to check information against certain biases. Because as science has proven over and over again, the human senses works to fool you most of the time. And it is unreliable. And we as African Americans should know this firsthand, especially when you have a single witness in a police matter that, the eyewitness testimony is unreliable. And study after study has demonstrated this. So how can we obtain information from the natural world, about the natural world, without being fooled by our senses? And this is why we create instruments made of the natural world that is more sensitive and can detect phenomena in the natural world to give us better insight on reality, and is not dependent upon our human senses. And so, the backlash in the humanities comes from this phenomenon which we call physics envy. And so the term physics envy is a phrase used to criticize modern writing and research of academics working in areas such as softer sciences, liberal arts, business studies, and humanities. The term argues that writing and working practices in these disciplines have overused confusing jargon and complicated mathematics in order to seem more rigorous and like mathematics-based subjects like physics. Physics envy refers to the envy, perceived or real, of scholars in other disciplines for the mathematical precision of fundamental concepts obtained by physicists. It is an accusation raised against disciplines, typically against social sciences and liberal arts such as literature, philosophy, and psychology, when these academic areas try to express their fundamental concepts in terms of mathematics, which is seen as an unwarranted push for reductionism. And so you had individuals who were so-called social scientists, the liberal arts and the humanities, trying to apply physics-type methodology to learn about human groups and human people. And so the thing we got to understand first and foremost about the scientific method and things of this nature, and why we have instruments to learn about the natural world, is to avoid all the biases and things made by human beings. It's not a tool that you would use to study humans, which is why, you know, at the beginning I talk about how, you know, they're getting information from non-human sources. And so the focus of or the source of information again is the actual physical phenomena and deduced laws of nature to describe the natural things around us. And so it is not used, it is not supposed to be used in any social context. So it's really the social scientists or the liberal arts folks who, out of envy of physics and the prestige of physics and astronomy and chemistry, et cetera, that in the, you know, the 1700s, 1800s tried to use the sense of objectivity and all this in the humanities disciplines, and you can still see, like, because it is believed that the, you know, like mathematics and physics, et cetera, is more rigorous and more intellectually engaging than the humanities. And this type of idea still persists even today. So, for example, in this article, DNA Evidence, the Impact of Genetic Research on Historical Debates, 2010, there's a commentary made here saying that this is not surprising given the interest that governments and funding bodies currently express in interdisciplinary research, a phenomenon described by STS scholars and mentioned in the introduction. However, once funding has been obtained, geneticists feel the need to shed the spoiled identity of humanities scholars by minimizing their involvement with academic history. Ironically, they defend their position by claiming that the deeper they engage with history, the less objective and therefore correct their findings will be. And so you have a different mentality in terms of the accurateness of like history and the humanities and whatnot, as which could be more precisely given in the so-called hard sciences. And in that same article, you know, given, because he interviewed a lot of historians and a lot of geneticists, and this is, you know, one of the conclusions that the author came to be as a result of interviewing these geneticists. So he says, the case studies considered here are also provide an intriguing new perspective on the three modes of interdisciplinarity suggested by Berry et al. As in mode 2, both historians and geneticists see their relationship as hierarchical. Both groups appear to view genetics as a discipline, which is in a service position in relation to history. However, ironically, geneticists nevertheless consider their discipline to be cognitively superior to the one from which they are deriving their research questions. And so this attitude of that, you know, the natural sciences are more rigorous and more cognitively superior to the humanities has been an idea that goes back, you know, a few centuries. And it's because of this hierarchical attitude that you had scholars in these early days trying to use the jargon, trying to use the language and methods of the natural sciences in the humanities. And as time went on, they discovered that it could not be done. And so the idea of objectivity, of course, is not going to work in Afrocentric literature when you're talking about African people and in terms of their culture, their language, and things of that nature, because that's not a tool that you would use in that context. You would only use it when you're dealing with the natural sciences. So if you wanted to discuss, for example, the drying of the Sahara, which motivated you know, African people to move across the continent at a certain time, you would use the tools of the natural sciences in that point. After that, you know, you would have to abandon it. And so there's where places that you can use it. It has strengths and limitations depending upon the nature of the research question you're doing. And so when it comes to, again, the sciences, getting back to the question, when it comes to the sciences, the knowledge is obtained from non-human instruments and phenomena around the world. The Africans do the exact same thing. And so I might come back to this slide a little later. It's talking about the cosmos and life or whatnot. But when the African, especially in African spirituality, one of the ways in which they get knowledge is through divination, in the study of the so-called deities. But the reason why they go to deities is because they believe that the deities will be objective, that they would not be bogged down by the fetters which human beings are, riddled with. And so this is why we consult spirit, because spirit is not going to lie to us. It has an objective view of what's going on in the universe and things of this nature. And then so it is from this going into and the studying and interacting with the divinities, according to the tradition, for which even the sciences developed in those days. So, for example, you have in the Papyrus of Nebseni, and we're dealing with the declarations of innocence here. And so in this, dealing with, Ani, the text says, and this is an ancient Egyptian text, homage to you, divine ones of the great hall of Ma'ati, who have no lies in their bodies, who live on Ma'at, who drink of Ma'at before Horus in his disk. Rescue me from Babi, one who lives on the entrails of, or even those with high status on this day of the great reckoning. Behold me, I come before you without wrongdoing, without guilt, without evil, without a witness against me. For there is none against whom I have done anything. I live on Ma'at. I drink of Ma'at. I have done what people speak of, and that which pleases the divinities. I have satisfied God with that which he loves. I have given bread to the hungry, water to the thirsty, clothes to the naked, and a boat to those without one. I have given divine offerings to the divine ones, and invocation offerings to the departed. Rescue me then and protect me. Do not complain against me before the great God, for I am clean of mouth and clean of hands, one to whom it is said, welcome, come in peace, by those who see him or her. Indeed, I have come here to bear witness to truth, and to set the scales of justice in their proper place among those who are silent. Again, when we go to the beginning of this, when he's talking to the great gods, he's introducing himself to the great gods. And when he mentions them in terms in the great hall of Ma'ati, those who have no lies in their bodies, because spirit does not lie, it's not biased. And so in the sciences and even in African tradition, they all seek objectivity. And matter of fact, that objectivity was personified as a goddess Ma'at. And this is why when you see on the scales of Ma'at in ancient Kemet, that the scales are even. It's not like our scales of justice where something leans towards something. This is a visual representation of what objectivity is that the truth, no matter who it is. And this is why, for example, in the same text, you see,
Brother Assad, could you wrap up in about 30? You're a bit over. Could you wrap up in like 30 seconds or less?
No problem. This is why in the Papyrus of Nebseni, in the Declaration of Innocence in line 26, he says, I have not winked at injustice. Meaning, and you'll see different variations of this particular line, meaning that they have not judged wrongly, that they judged objectively. That when somebody did wrong, they judged it as wrong, and they weren't, biased. And so, objectivity is the cornerstone of African spirituality. And so, I can stop there.
Okay, Zach, unmute. Unmute.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna restate the question.
Okay.
Just for recap. So it's a two-part question. Is objectivity African? Regardless of whatever your answer is, based on your answer, what are some implications for African people? Does that make sense? Is that clear? Okay.
All right. So how I want to approach this, I want to approach this from looking at the development of Western modernity after the shift from Christianity to modernity in Europe. So basically, what I want to do is basically say, how did Europeans retain the power, the institutional power for their own intellectual legitimacy? So what I mean is the way the church controlled the legitimacy of particular ideas shifts from the church to the scientists in Europe as the development of modernity happens, right? So effectively what you have is the priests, the people who think they're sanctified and the people who think they're holier than everyone within the Catholic Church and in Europe. Those people were persecuting people for developing scientific ways of engaging their own environment and nature inside of Europe. That's what they call the occult. So the thing is, those people started to gain legitimacy as the European kings who were given their political legitimacy by the church. When they were seen as tyrants, basically the attendant epistemologies that come along with the church then started to shift. They started to shift out of power. Does that make, am I being clear? Does that make sense? So what I mean is, when we look at white supremacy, we have to think about what dominant paradigm do they organize their ideas with? So before, it used to be Christianity. Christianity is still very intertwined throughout the whole thing. But that's why you have a secular state. You have secular states now, because the thing is, these kinds of modern ideas were seen as a break away from Christianity, but they still need the same kinds of, I guess you could say, mechanisms and methods to produce knowledge, or the same epistemology. They still need to produce those things in order for their ways of thinking to be transplanted into the people they colonize. So effectively, the reason I want to talk about Afrocentricity and its development, because the whole reason Afrocentricity is developed is because they were Dr. Asante, Dr. Mazama, and many others were trying to create a paradigm that had scientific validity in order to receive recognition as a discipline. That's what makes Black studies a discipline, if it has its own social science. So the thing is, they needed their own science and their own epistemology that was consistent with African history and culture, right? In order to study African people, because objectivity is basically I'm not going to call it objectivity, because it's the notion of objectivity. It's really objectification. So the thing is, what I'm trying to get at, where am I going? What I'm trying to say is, we can't look at objectivity outside of how it functions when white people use it inside of white supremacy. It's nothing that we invented. It's not out of our languages. So the thing is, when we start saying that African spirituality is objective, it's almost like we're saying we are Black versions of the people who created epistemology or objectivity. Does that make sense? So what I mean is people understand African spirituality, Haitian voodoo, Akom, Ifa, many others, as sciences unto themselves, because they have their own way of coming to the truth, their own way of thinking, their own way to produce knowledge that is not the same as objectification. So I don't think that we can play black remix theory and paint Eurocentric paradigms Black, or call them African, because effectively what we're doing is, I guess you could say, we're transplanting, or we're implanting their ideas into our history and culture. And to me, that's something that comes, the implication for African people with that is what Dr. Sante says, you'll have a series of hits and misses because you don't have consistency. You don't have theoretical consistency or conceptual consistency. So Afrocentricity was a paradigm that's supposed to give us conceptual consistency as we studied African people. Because for example, I was just reading The Destruction of Black Civilization again. I was just reading it a couple weeks ago. And what I began to realize is many of the, I guess you can say, the gaps or some of the limitations that Chancellor Williams runs into as he studies civilization, his assumptions about civilization, he doesn't recognize that his own objectivity is what's causing him to have particular assumptions about civilization and barbarism. You see, like, so that's what I mean. So what objectivity does is it veils the Eurocentric assumptions, and instead of, I guess you can say, placing them within the proper context of their own history and culture. Does that make sense? So,
all right. So Zach,
yeah, okay.
30 seconds.
What's up?
30-second wrap up.
30 seconds. So I don't think it's African. I think it's a Eurocentric epistemology that some African people have utilized to, some of them. I mean, scholars dig up all kinds of great things, regardless of what their ideology is. But that doesn't. We need to get to the root of the conceptual underpinning. So the problem is that objectivity as a concept is Eurocentric, and it has implications for the way we think. So that's it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Your mic is muted.
I always do this. All right. So thank you. So anyways, so now that we've had a pretty good sense of where each speaker is coming from, I wanted to know, I guess what I wanted to do now that we got those first two questions out of the way to sort of ground the discussion, I want to kind of allow more of an open exchange forum between Zach and Asar. Whoever wants to start it can start, and sort of where they see points of contention. But before that, I actually did have one question that I did want to ask because it came up. It's something that I think is important. It's going to sound silly, but I think both of you, and I think our audience will know why I ask it. Is science more rigorous than so-called social sciences? Do you see why I'm asking the question the way I'm asking it? So just very briefly, like, keep it to like no more than a minute, each of your perspectives. Is natural sciences, hard sciences, more rigorous than social sciences?
My short answer is yes.
Why? Brief why? Just a brief.
Is because of the amount of testing and the kinds of testing that is done to come to a conclusion that you just can't do for ethical reasons in the social sciences, and the reliability and the reproducibility, the lack of, when you're doing observations amongst social groups. And so you have scientists around the world trying to falsify these hypotheses, and it just requires a certain level of rigor that is just not present in the social sciences, so to speak. And so I just leave it at there.
Okay, Zach, okay, unmute your mic, Zach. Unmute it, and I'll repeat the question.
Right.
Are the hard sciences more rigorous than the social sciences? Just so keep it real brief, because I think that's really important question.
I think I think when we're talking about sciences, I think we're talking about systems of thought, which are not inherently rigorous. But I think institutions, in terms of what's been set up for the natural sciences, there's more of those kinds of institutions, and those kinds of things directly shape political phenomena. So those kinds of things are directly connected to technological development and war and things like that. So yeah, there's going to be more resources, funding, institutions that go into using those things, because I think the implications for the findings in those fields with the hard sciences, where you're actually dealing with I guess you can say more complex technologies. Yeah, like it's going to be more rigorous. But the social sciences, it's just, like they treat it like people's opinions. Like, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not as rigorous. I mean, who's gonna say somebody's more rigorous than Cedric Robinson? You know what I mean? Like, I mean, they could or they couldn't be. Like,
all right. So thank you for that question. I hope, because I do think it wasn't important. I wasn't thinking about that question when I envisioned this style, but I think it's an important one to get a sense of y'all's perspective. So what I want to do is just let me make sure let me just set my timer so I'm not I think 30 minutes is good for just an open. I think 30 is about good. Does that make sense? 30, because we got time. I think 30 minutes is a good, just for a dialogue between Zach
get my
and Oh, you good, Zach?
Yeah, I'm gonna get my car and charge my phone, but yeah, I'm good. You guys can go.
All right, so just a 30 minutes of just back and forth between, not in a tactics way, but I just mean a back and forth sort of dialogue about the differences between y'all in terms of how you're understanding the subjectivity issue based on what you've heard.
Okay, I guess I'll start off. the fundamental issue here is understanding. See, what I find with a lot of folks in the humanities is that they really don't understand the natural sciences, what is involved in terms of the process of knowledge acquisition and what's involved. So, when it comes to, because a lot of people don't like math, for example. And so, when it comes to deep statistics, or if we need to do a trig analysis on certain things, that's just not part of the repertoire. And, when it comes to this notion of objectivity, again, it is something in which you utilize to understand the natural non-human world. It's not for social, the liberal arts in that sense. It's not for the humanities. And so it's not even really a question of, does this belong, saying here it doesn't. Because when I want to study and learn about the electromagnetic system, I don't have to consult human beings and worry about their opinions. I have to create instruments that can detect the electromagnetic field. Or if I want to talk about the spectrum of light, for example, human beings can only see a small spectrum of light. But if I want to access the true spectrum, I need an instrument that goes beyond what human beings are capable of. So I can see UV and gamma rays and things of that.
So I hear you. You're muted, or something's wrong with your sound.
I'm muted, but there is some sound issue.
Okay. Can I respond? You ready?
Wait, sorry. I can hear Zach.
You can hear me now?
Brother Asar. I can hear Zach.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I hear Brother Asar.
So can I respond? So I think one of the problems, I guess what I think where I depart from Asar, where I think I disagree, is I don't think, well, I get maybe not, maybe I shouldn't say disagree. I think what it is I have a different I want to focus on something else. I think what it is I think the difference is for people in the humanities, we do think about sociological things more than people who are in the natural sciences, the hard sciences. And I think that's why it's hard for sometimes for quote unquote scientists or people who are trained within Western science to understand Europe's conceptual monopoly and how that's functional, how objectivity enables Europeans to retain a conceptual monopoly over rational thinking, scientific thinking, you know, those kinds of things. So we think we need to assimilate into their epistemology in order to receive recognition for the knowledges that we produce. So the thing is, when we're talking about the humanities or even the hard sciences, like the natural sciences, the thing is, African people have their own ways of understanding. I was just reading Ancestral Voices, and you brought up electromagnetics. There's a point he brings up in the book about Shango being the divinity of iron, right? And how iron is in human blood, but also you have to understand how the electrical charges in the human body are created too. So when you talk about Shango being the god of thunder and lightning, or those kinds of things, those attendant ideas, it's a holistic way of understanding the relationship between natural elements. And that's not the way Europeans understand things, but that's still scientific. So that's why I said it's like it's hard for us to share a house or to share a paradigm, share objectivity with Europeans, and then have space for us to grow our own ideas and our own ways of understanding. And I think that's where we depart from each other. You think you can remix it, and I don't. I'm a little more conservative in terms of, I guess you could say, what the lines are between, you know, Afrocentric thinking and European modernity. Like, I guess I think that's the split right there. Like, I think the argument is a Black Enlightenment argument. I do.
I think you really have to study Africa more. And you know, I'm a little older than you, so I've been studying Africa very seriously for like 25 years. And one of the things that I can say is that, you know, a lot of people who speak about Africa really don't know about Africa. They don't read meta nature. They don't get into this stuff rigorously. Like, so I'm holding up my book here, Illusion Volume 2. I have a chapter in here on the African origins of the word science, where I linguistically trace the word science to African languages, and especially in ancient Egypt. And I not only ask the question, can the word science itself be traced to Africa, but can the scientific method be traced to Africa?
Maybe in part.
And what we discovered is that is just the case. And even modern scientists, which I cite in the text, recognize that the ancient Egyptians created the scientific method. And so when we talk about this idea that rigor, that objectivity, the scientific method, etc., is a European construct, I have to go back to my quote with Dr. Amos Wilson and showing that these are African phenomena and that we shouldn't give up these ideas because you in modern times associate them with Europeans. And so one is just historically untrue. And because it's historically untrue, you miss those things when it comes to Africa. So like you brought up Shango. Shango is a deity and who is known for not being biased. And this is why people swear on Shango or they swear on Ogun, because they're not going to be biased. They don't have the frail. Again, when
it means you tell the truth.
Listen, when African spiritualists call on and ask of deity, they're asking for an objective view on reality to get information that is not human, that is not based on the human frailties and biases. That's why we consult. The matter of fact, I'll let you speak and I'm gonna show a video when you finish. It's only 2 minutes and 43 seconds.
All right. Well, I just want to go back to, well, I mean, I could share this, but I'm just gonna read one sentence out of Dr. Marine Ba'ani's essay, The Demystification of Objectivity, where she says, she's talking about objectivity. So here I go. She says, by epistemology, we imply a conception of truth and a method for reaching that truth, a concept of knowledge and the way to attain it. Plato said that the important thing was the nature of the thing to be known. It had to be objectified. No, it said that the important thing was the nature of the thing to be known. It had to be objectified. Without this objectification, there could be no true knowledge. How then to transform the subjective world into an objective body of knowledge? Quite a manipulation. The key lies in control. So what I'm saying is, when we're talking about Shango or Ogun and we're talking about truth, I'm thinking Baina, Mama Baina Bello, she has a lecture about the 7 principles of voodoo. And one of the things that she says is Shango or Ogun, well, not Shango, Ogu is for telling the truth that benefits a community. So there is no objective or unbiased truth. You want the truth for your own people, to produce the truth that will help you and other people. So we have to talk about the functional implications of the knowledge that we're producing. There's no sense in making objective knowledge that's unbiased and this and that just for the sake of knowledge. That's why we need our own people to write our own history, because no one is objective. You want people to write history to advance your people and advance your interests based on the truth. So the thing is, when we have certain methodologies that come from Europeans, the truth that we need to advance ourselves towards liberation becomes skewered, and it becomes obscured, and it becomes bogged down with other attendant misconceptions or misinterpretations of the truth of our reality. So that's why we want Afrocentricity to be consistent with our history and culture. Because, you know, white people don't tell you that objectivity is based on their model of civilization and their ideas in all areas of people activity. They don't tell you that. They just say they're objective. We're being honest. We're telling you, we are coming from the perspective of African people, history, civilization, and culture. They just say they're objective. And that's why I said, can a racist actually be objective? Why would a black person want to be objective? You want to be on your own side. Like, I mean, that's how that goes in the humanities, but it should go like that in the hard sciences. And it doesn't often sometimes, because people don't understand that objectivity is an ideology. That's really what it is. And the implications of the ideology mean that you contribute to the development of whose civilization, even if you know or don't know.
Okay. I'm going to share this video.
How long's the video? 2 minutes or so?
It's 2 minutes and 43 seconds.
Okay, that's fine.
So this is, and I'm not making the argument that this is right and exact. I'm just showing the mentality of African people when it comes to spiritual concepts. Okay. So this is a brother, a priest out of Ghana. And, you know, I'm not sure if anybody has seen this. Somebody had stolen some money and nobody was fessing up to stealing. So in order to get an objective truth or reality on who stole it, this is the methodology that they use to find out, you know, some information about reality and who stole it. So you'll see the brother back here with these kind of broom devices, and he says some words of power, which we would say Heka in the ancient Egyptian. He says some words of power, asks the spirit for clarity, is this the person who stole such and such and such and such? And if not, the brushes will just, he brushes it on the face and around the neck. And if it just smoothly goes across, this person is innocent. If the person is guilty, it will lock up and catch him on the neck and choke him. So this is what you'll see.
Right. So we are the come from la.
So hopefully that was clear. Y'all can see it. In this instance here, again, the objectivity is directed in a different way. The reason why you consult spirit in African spiritual traditions is because it's the assumption that it doesn't lie. There's not going to be bias. It's going to be objective. It's not going to care about who the person is or who his family is. It's going to provide you the truth, just like what we saw in the ancient Egyptian in terms of the Ma'ati, those who do not lie. That's why we consult in our traditions the spirit world, because they are non-human and don't have the human frailties. And so this idea that objectivity is not African is not accurate at all.
Well, objectivity is not the truth. It's the epistemology, how you get to the truth. And that's why I said that's not universal. So that's why I said it's not just this is the truth. It's how do you get to the truth? And African people get to the truth in different ways. Epistemology is one method, but they make it a monopoly, and they say this is the only way you can get to the truth. That's the problem.
That's not what they say. And matter of fact, for anyone who,
well, they teach you
as I
deal
with in terms of, I don't know where you went to school and they taught you that, but the first thing you should know about the, for example, the scientific method is that there is no one scientific method. That's something you learn when you first come into a science class, and that depending on the nature of the research question, you know, you have a different order of operations, you know, in terms of the scientific method. What is consistent in terms of the scientific methods is that the research question has to be falsifiable. That means you have the possibility that you could be wrong in terms of your hypothesis, and that it is reproducible by other scientists, regardless of their race, so-called race, their you know, wealth or whatnot into this nature. If they do the experiment the way that you set it up, they should have the same or similar results. And so those are the fundamental things that they look for in terms of the scientific method. But its particular order and things of this nature, it's different. And so, matter of fact, I discussed that in the text and cite that with citations, that no one thinks of it as a universal thing. And so again, the problem with the people in the humanities is that they don't know science because they don't do science. When you do science, you get the details of how this stuff works, because it's something that you have to do. It's not something that you simply read about. You have to do science. And as a result of doing science, you get to ins and outs and why certain things are set in motion the way that they are, so that you don't distort your experiment, you don't distort the results.
But I guess for me, because we're talking about objectivity, you can't abstract the ideas from the behavior. So the thing is, you do science, but that's because you're thinking something. So what you do comes from what you think. So that's why I said, if we're sharing objectivity with racists, because that's what it seems like we're doing. If we're sharing objectivity, then the thing is, we're going to do the same methodology, the same methods, the same thinking techniques as the people who created the paradigm. So the thing is, in the humanities, that's the institutional problem of the university and miseducation, is that you have people using methodology and ideas and ideologies that come from our oppressors. So that's why Dr. Jacob Carruthers has an essay called Science and Oppression, because his essay is basically saying you can't use their methods and think you're going to end up with fundamentally different results that will help you toward your liberation. It doesn't work that way. So that's why if somebody is a Mambo or a Hugon or a Babalawo, they're going to have different methods than a Christian priest or an imam. They have a different way of coming to the truth, a different epistemology. So the problem in the American university and the Western university and universities in Africa and in South America, because of white supremacist global system, is that we are trained by our enemies to find the truths that we need. And the problem is they won't train us to get the truth that we need in the way that we need it, or it's not going to be positioned or refined in the way. So part of the Afrocentric enterprise is to refine those conceptual problems that shape our behavior and confuse us about what to do to operate and fight for our own liberation. Objectivity seems to be, to me, to be the pillar of white supremacy. Ibram Kendi has a book that just came out. What is it? Something about anti-racist. What is it? Something about an anti-racist.
Anti-racist? Is it how to be an anti-racist or stat?
How to be an anti-racist? Because
it's that one.
Yeah, that one. How to be an anti-racist, and the whole thing is his argument. I remember when he came to Temple, he basically says every racist calls himself a non-racist. So when you try to be a non-racist, that you're occupying a non-position. So what you really want to be is an anti-racist. So Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, what she did is she says, all right, so if this is how white people organize white supremacy, what we need is a scientific counter-racism. So the problem is, how do we have a scientific counter-racism if we're sharing science with our enemies? So, that's why I said science is a system of ideas. It's a system of ideas that you use to produce knowledge.
It's a system of methods.
System of methods. Sure.
Yeah, so methods.
Sorry.
Huh?
I
can't hear you, breaking up a little bit.
You're breaking up.
Hold up a minute. Okay, I want to just bring it back a little bit, and I have a question. Wait. Hold on. Hold on. Just give me a. Is it clear, or is there a difference?
Mm-hmm. No,
is there a difference?
You're straight to me.
Okay. Zach, can you hear me? So sorry, can you hear me good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so because I've been following, so I just want some conversations just to bring it back, and this is really interesting. I will say, I'll be honest. Part of being in the academy, I do have issues with people in humanities and natural sciences, always for different reasons. And some of you have heard, I know both Asar and Zach, and some of you all who know me very well have heard my sort of issues. with humanities, I think about like postmodernism, right? Some of the issues we have to, everything is fluid, post-racialism and those kinds of things, right? Then with the natural sciences, dealing with the history of racism of some of the founding members and such. So how do those type of issues affect the way we think about, or for you to affect the way you think about this particular, I never thought of it in this way until I really just hearing y'all's exchange, that those issues. So in the, I guess for a SAR, I don't want to put it in a binary way, but just whatever. For a SAR, dealing with the racism in, the natural sciences. Does that question, part of the question, make sense? And then for Zach, dealing with, postmodernism, postmodernist theory, these kind of post-racial ideas. How do you conceptualize that problem from your individual perspectives? And I'll start with Zach first.
About postmodernism?
Yeah, postmodernism, it can, because I think there's something,
Yeah.
because this is a very, does my question make sense? Does my question make sense? Okay, good. As long as
I think I know what you want to hear out of me with postmodernism.
I loaded a bit, but I think one of the issues where people bring up the lack of rigor in humanities, I think about when you challenge certain groups' opinions and people start attacking you, almost like Hotepism. That's kind of what I alluded to earlier, like, these kinds of things, right?
Well, all right. So one thing that it's funny, I had to come to terms with this myself. I remember sitting in class with Dr. Mazama, and I made a comment about religion, and I said something about religion, all religion being dogma or something like that, and she disagreed with me, and she basically said, she told me, she said, you're operating under the assumption that all human behavior comes from rational thought. You know what I mean? Like people are always thinking rationally, and that's why they do what they do. And for Europeans, that's how they define who they conceive of being a part of humanity and who's not. Who has rationality is human. If you can think like me, if you're a rational thinker like me, the white person, then that means I can see you as a human. You're a noble savage. You're along with me. But if you have your own way of thinking that I don't control, or that doesn't come from me, then that means you're crazy. You're a hotep. You ran off the plantation. You're a drapetomaniac. You're not a human. You're a nigger. You're backward. You're a savage. You're whatever. There's a laundry list. You're archaic. There's a laundry list of words. But where I was going with that is to say that white people, again, that's why I said, like, back in the day, white people who were doing, like spell casting, alchemy, and those kinds of things, well, things that we call science, they were developing their own ways of thinking, and that's why they called it the occult. That's what postmodernism is. Postmodernism is a small group, niche group of white people trying to break away from modernity so that they can conceptualize and think about their own individual liberties and doing whatever they want to do, and studying white people doing whatever they want to do, or anybody doing whatever they want to do as individuals. That's what postmodernism is. It's floating outside of European history. That's what it's floating outside of all history. That's what postmodernism is designed to do. It's designed to basically say, my interpretation is the truth, no matter how I got to it. My interpretation is the truth. So the thing is, that's different from the rigor that goes along with the natural sciences. And in the humanities, people are responding to not having done the level of empiricism or the level of rigor, the level of work, in order to fight against racist and other ideas that are supported by the hard sciences. That's why people in the natural sciences, research in the natural sciences. That's why I said the natural sciences support the institutional power of the people who oppress us. So that's why I said, we have to be, it's hard to share terms with people actively in the middle of being oppressed. Like, you can, how do you think like them towards fighting them. That's not how you dismantle their system. That's using Master's tool to recreate Master's house in replacement of Master's house.
Okay, all right.
But yeah.
Exactly. And for Brother Asar, so I'm gonna restate because I had two different, because I saw, you know, you're coming from different angles.
Mm-hmm.
For the natural sciences, how do you reconcile, you know, like the racism of, because I think that's a part of it too sometimes, like, you know, with gynecology, how it started. We look at Sarah Bartman, so-called Sarah Bartman, and, you know, those kind of instances of racism within science. How do you reconcile that within your perspective about objectivity? Does that make sense, or do you need me to restate it?
I think I understand you. And again, you know, it's kind of hard to have the conversation when people really don't understand that objectivity has nothing to do with the so-called social sciences. And so that is already agreed upon by people in the natural sciences. It's not a debate. It's not a discussion. What you have is certain individuals, just like how you have folks in the humanities trying to adopt and be in the realm of the natural sciences and to take jargon and concepts from there and apply it to the humanities. You have scientists, so-called scientists, trying to take and deal with humanities issues and apply certain ideas. For example, like with craniometry, you know, there's a legit science in the way to measure and classify skulls and things of this nature. They stop being scientific once they put a value judgment that certain people with this skull index, you know, has this level of intelligence. And so this is stuff that has been fought against in the sciences as well, you know, to the point where, you know, any true biologist will tell you that there's no such thing as biological race. It is the
biological
it's a construct of races who happen to be in the scientific fields. But the way that science is set up is to be able to, regardless if something is popular at a time, if more and more people are attacking that question and it doesn't live up to the standards of science, it has to be abandoned. And so while that was a prominent concept by a few people, you know, over time that is waned. But you still got folks who are, you know, still using old, outdated jargon and still trying to prove the race theory because they couldn't do it in these other ways. So now they're trying to use genetics to prove, you know, saying the race concept. And that's fallen by the wayside, you know, for those who follow the genetic arguments and things. And so, you know, when we're dealing with, you know, science and objectivity, it's just not a part of the humanities. And so that it's, no matter what you say in terms of
objectivity is not a part of the hard sciences either.
Wait, Zach,
Zach,
let me finish. Zach, let
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if I ask you, for example, give me the social sciences, you know, interpretation in terms of what happens when you mix bleach with ammonia and the fumes that derive from it. I'm actually use that.
You said what happens when you mix ammonia with?
In terms of the truth of what happens when you mix, you know, as a child, your mother should have told you not to mix bleach and ammonia, because what happens every single time that you do it?
Yeah, it creates fumes.
Yes, a poisonous gas or fumes. It doesn't do it sometimes, it does it every single time. And so we have an objective view in terms of what happens to these natural chemicals in the fire. But that has nothing to do with, you know, whether you're Afrocentric or whether you're Eurocentric. This is just a phenomenon of nature that is going to happen regardless if you're fat, if you're skinny, if you're Catholic, if you're a Protestant, if you're a voodoo priest, if you're an ancient Egyptian priest, if you believe in God or you don't believe in God, regardless to what your belief is and your worldview, every single time that you mix ammonia and bleach, a poisonous gas is going to arise. And so this is what the objective in the sciences have.
Hold up. Giga, just a little bit off of my you kind of got it, but you just a little bit off, and I want to kind of just concisely, because I want to get into Q&A for the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So would you say, because I want to make sure I'm interpreting correctly, the racism of scientists, contemporary or historical, is more a reflection of those individuals, not the sciences themselves? So in a sense, they're not doing science properly. Is that?
I'll put it like this. You know, killers are going to be killers. It doesn't matter if you give them a gun or if you give them a knife, if you give them a baseball bat. Those are just tools for them to execute their killer instincts, so to speak. Now, this hierarchy of being, there's a whole study on this going back before the Europeans, according to their own history, even adopted science and the scientific method. This ideology has been a part of European history since the beginning of written records, even in the biblical tradition, this hierarchy of being. So when science comes along, they try to use this in terms of the craniometry, like we said earlier, and in terms of Darwinism. These are just tools that they try to use to make their, separatist and hierarchical arguments that was already a part of the culture. And so it's just like they didn't have genetics in the 17 and 1800s. But now that genetics is a thing, now the racists try to use that as a tool to try to make racialized arguments. So it's not
so it's a tool thing. It's a
tool. It's just an instrument. It's neutral unto itself. So when you want to just get the facts of the situation, how you use it, that's your culture and your political, ideology. So we got to be able to separate those things. That's why I say, like, if I put and ammonia together in a bucket, regardless of my, political ideology, this is the facts that is going to create poisonous gas.
All right. So
now, if you argue that, all
right. So I just want to wrap it because I want to do Q&A because it's very active chat. But before I do the Q&A, 30 seconds or less. Why is objectivity African or not African? Zach, why is objectivity, in your view, not African?
Objectification is not African because you're alienating yourself from what you should assume you are connected to.
Okay.
So it's not African.
Okay. Brother Asar, objectivity is African. In your view, why? 30 seconds or less.
Because the Africans say so. And they do it in their practice, and it is most pronounced in their spiritual practice. So objectivity is gaining information from non-human beings and instruments.
All right.
So that is the essence of African spirituality.
Thank you. So I'll open. So I see some questions in the chat. I see a lot in the chat. So how do I want to do this? Actually, because I'm on my tablet and I don't really like how it is. Let me see if. Okay, can people raise is everybody capable of doing the raise their hand feature?
The host cannot. Like, I have questions, but I can't raise my hand because I'm a host.
Okay, well, I'll start with you just because you're the host bias. And and one question, Brother Mwale.
It's not objective.
Can I give a question to both of the panelists?
Sure.
All right, so the question I have for Asar is, Brother Asar, would you concede that the white epistemic terrorists have historically used the concept of objectivity to advance a particular worldview that furthers their objective of world domination? That's my question for Brother Asar.
Yes and no.
So yes, they have used objectivity as a concept, as a concept to further and advance their objective of world domination. So yes and no.
They also use subjectivity to do the same thing. So yes and no.
Objectivity is a subjectivity.
All right. So
I wish I was in Philly so I can bring our books where you'll see African scholars who are initiated in their own systems discuss objectivity in their own traditions, like Fukuyao in the Congo.
And I can give you location theory.
So to Zach, my question for you would be, would you say that subjectivity is to postmodernity what objectivity is to modernity?
Say it again.
I said, would you say that subjectivity is to postmodernity what objectivity is to modernity?
No.
Okay.
Nah, I don't completely understand the question, but
So
I think I'm hearing, I don't.
You talked about how you gave a point where you stated that the postmodern theorists today, who are a small, loose band of white theoreticians that are operating in the way that the early occult was operating when they were breaking away from the church. So now you have this group of white theoreticians that are trying to break away from modernity, and they're using postmodern theory. So I'm asking you, is subjectivity for postmodern theory the same as what objectivity is for modern theory?
No, because I think what it is they're all theories. So the thing is, it's like, I don't know. I wouldn't I don't know. I wouldn't articulate it that way. So I don't know how to answer the question.
But isn't that what postmodernity is? It's basically whatever I desire something to be based upon, like, everything becomes relative within a postmodern concept?
That's not really what it is. Because really what it is so basically for Western civilization, they have their foundational paradigms that they build their society. So that's why you see like a lot of these white conservatives and the trans people arguing with each other, because the trans people, they want to base their notion of gender outside of Western civilization. So that's why they use they use queer theory as postmodern theory, because they don't want to use history to come up with or to actually find a concept of gender to based on. So basically the conservatives are like, no, we need our concepts of gender because that's the foundation of Western civilization. So objectivity it operates in that way. Postmodernism, what it really is white people trying to find space for their own behaviors, whatever it is, and try to, like Asar was saying, like try to use some kind of scholastic something to justify whatever their behaviors are, So I don't know if I answered your question. I don't know.
No, it's good. We can continue the conversation offline. That's cool. I appreciate both of the debaters. I think strong points were made, although I do think that y'all weren't necessarily having the same debate, if that makes sense. I think that y'all.
Well, yeah, I think we disagree on what objectivity is. To me, objectivity is a made-up European word like homosexuality. It describes something people do, but it's like, I don't know, like, to give it legitimacy to me is giving legitimacy to universalism. Like I can have an unbiased. It's almost like you're like omnipotent, like omnipotent, omniscient. You all knowing. Like it don't make sense to me.
Right, I hate when people use that term, made up a word. Every single word in any language across the world is made up.
Sure, for a purpose.
Words don't come out the sky, or they don't grow out of the ground. Every single word, every single concept comes from a human being.
Yeah, but words are made for a reason, for people to do
Understood,
something.
But you say made up a word. Everybody makes up a word. All humans make up a word.
All right, but you're the linguist. So why the Europeans come up with?
Well, that's the argument. All right. So next question.
I don't think we can isolate races from what they create.
Exactly.
Huh?
So next question. So actually, I'll just read. You know what? I'll just read the chat and make it simple for myself. One at a time. So there was a question I saw here earlier. Or so if someone drop a question in the chat, I feel like.
I have a question for Brother Asar.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Is that Wahida?
Yes, it's me.
Okay. All right.
It is not. Do you believe, you said that the spirits are objective. Do you believe that our ancestors are objective and that they are not biased to us and our success?
This is why I said at the beginning that their belief is that the spirits are objective. I wasn't making a value claim that they are. What I'm saying, the question is objectivity African? And so it is part of African culture, and Africans believe that they can get information that is unbiased and the truth from the concept of spirit. Matter of fact, one person who discusses this deeply is Dr. Malidoma Some, and his Water in the Spirit text, when he talks about, how any of the knowledge of medicines and technology that they have all come from, for example, the Kotumble, which are these spirit beings. And so what he articulates is that we get knowledge about reality from spirits, and the spirits don't lie. They don't have our human frailties, and it's an objective view of reality. That's what he states. And so I'm just a reporter on this in terms of what they believe. I'm not saying that they're right. So that's a totally different question.
I agree with your position stating that the spirits are not going to lie, but is that mutually exclusive to my ancestors being biased to me? So, like, when you're talking about consulting the spirits, I think that there's one way to look at that, and there's another way to look at when I'm consulting my ancestors. If you're saying that unbiasedness is the same as objectivity, then I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to articulate what I'm trying to ask.
I think what's happening is, I think what's happening is a very, I think there's a lot of core assumptions in objectivity because it's a methodology, it's a way of thinking. But I think what happens is it gets overly simplified, and that's when it begins to have currency among people who aren't necessarily trained in the methodology, but they still use the language. So I think that's why it's like you can find a million people saying, yeah, my ancestors are objective because they tell the truth, because it's a simple way. It's a simple way to express how they believe, but that doesn't capture all of the entire idea of objectivity. So if we want to capture the entire idea of objectivity, we have to look at its history in development within European civilization. Because if we just say, yeah, there's African people say all kinds of things, like just like feminism. It's like they make feminism into something simple and say it's just it just equals all women, or like they say like democracy is just everybody gets the right to vote. But no, it's like these complex systems have a complex history that,
right.
You know what I mean?
Like,
so
like they'll say feminism, they'll say feminism and then say, African women, because we were a certain way, like just automatically apply feminism to that. And the term is problematic. Well, I think that was my next question though, is like, should we be focused on these Eurasian term, like this European term of objectivity, rather than like if you look at, let's say, the father of medicine, right? We know that is Imhotep. Was he is there anything that we can do to find out the terms that, like, was he what did he call his methodologies that he used, and focus on that instead of having debates and arguments about these Eurasian terms, which I think are limiting. And I think, like Brother Omwale said, I think you guys are kind of talking about debating something different. But I'm not worried exactly. I'm following the conversation, and it's very interesting. I do appreciate both points, and I see what Asar is talking about, but I see where there's problems with it as well.
Okay, this is Brother Richard. Can I, because I've been trying to if I can, just I'm questioning Brother Asar's notion on this basis, and it is the basis of methodology, and the question of whether, not the question about objectivity, I'm not sure about that, but the question of whether scientific, was there a methodology to come to the conclusion that spirits are real, and what I'm wrestling with is the point that over the course of African human history, that they did not do the process that Brother Asar is saying that is uniquely defined by Western methodology to validate a scientific position, which is the observation and being able to come back and reformulate the same approach to come to the same conclusion. If African people are the oldest people looking at genetic population and looking at the length of time, are we saying that they didn't do those things? And where's the record that says that they didn't? Because whether it's objective or not, the method, if we're saying that the method of validating a fact comes out of the method, scientific fact comes out of that methodology, then you're either saying that Africans didn't do it, or what I hear you saying, just because they believe it, which is the end conclusion of whether what they came to believe was based on a scientific proven process.
Huh?
Can you repeat your question? Or was that you just making a statement?
Are you saying that Africans did not utilize, over the course of their human history, did not utilize the methodology that you're saying is the scientific methodology that is codified in the quote unquote Eurasian European process of how do you prove a fact is a fact?
Most Africans probably did not. And there were some Africans that did.
No, wait a minute, because if it's universal,
if you're going to ask me a question, can I answer it?
But I just want to make sure you're answering it, because if it's a universal process and putting it in an African-centered context,
did you hear what I stated earlier?
You're saying some did and some didn't.
Hold on, what did I say earlier about the scientific method? Were you on the line when we was talking about that?
I've heard you over time. So go ahead. I just want to make sure that I'm clear, because when you say some did and some didn't, it's making
we gotta understand that African people are not a monolith, and there is no single First of all, there's no single way to be African. They don't all speak the same language. They all don't have the same semantics. There's great commonality, but there's also great difference.
Listen.
Hold on, brother. Can I answer the question?
You're answering, but you're not answering my question.
You don't know if I'm answering your question because you keep interrupting.
Wait, Asar, hold up. Brother Richard, could you restate your question
because he's making it that in particular, cultural nations particularly may have came to a conclusion different than using the same methodological process. And I'm saying if the methodological process is universal, therefore each cultural system, no matter when they came to it, had to use the same method. And are you saying that the ones that they didn't use the scientific method and came to a conclusion? That's, by saying some did, some didn't, I don't know if you're saying that the scientific method is universal and some Africans used it and some didn't culturally. And that's what I'm trying to get at. Because when you say some did, some didn't, you're saying some didn't use the process and then just use belief.
Okay. All right.
So, I mean, that's just a reality. And so, as I was saying, a nomadic pastoralist is not going to have the same ways of knowing as somebody who is settled in an agricultural type society versus someone who is a hunter-gatherer. Modes of production requires different ways of living. And so, again, Africans are not a monolith. And that has to be the first thing understood. And so a lot of what happens, especially in African student circles, is that there's this oversimplification of what it means to be African and to determining what's African and what's not. And this is what's problematic, you know, in discussions like this. And so, like in my book here, I show in the discussion on science where the ancient Egyptians are doing just that. And it is recognized by scientists to this day in terms of the matter of fact, they have the term. Someone asked about the young lady who spoke before you asked about the term. The term that they use is tep hased in terms of the correct method.
But if this will be my last follow-up. But because you're still centralized. When we look at the astrological system, everybody agrees, was an astrological system that navigated the stars that eventually the pyramids is based off of, right? That system, of those stones being placed in a certain place, which is older than the even the pyramids itself. So the question comes: did those placements come to understanding by using a scientific method? And if that's
just answered
older,
your question.
You're saying yes.
Yes, I said that since the beginning of the conversation, that the scientific method and objectivity is African. And so this notion that Europeans somehow invented this stuff, this shows that people aren't researching Africa. They don't study ancient Egypt in any serious way. There's whole books written on the science of Egypt, its methodologies and things of this nature. And I know that, you know, most of y'all are probably young students, but, you know, probably when you're done with your dissertations and stuff to this nature, you have more time to study beyond your particular research focus. You know, maybe you can get into the details of these things and you'll come to discover that, you know, matter of fact, this is all Theophilo Benga writes about in his text, is these African origins of these scientific methods and rationality and objectivity. He has a book in English you can read, African Philosophy.
Yeah, I got
it's
that.
It's a blue book, came out in 2004, I think. 2004 or 2006.
All right, so I see two hands that are
Can I just add?
Wait, can you keep it like to 30 seconds or less?
Yeah, I was gonna. Yeah, all I was gonna say is I feel like the conversation we're having right now, I think it's important that one of the tools that we use in Afrocentricity is location theory. So the thing is, I think that's Marlon. I think it's good. My sister just cut on the car, but what I was gonna say is I think when we talk about location theory, we need to focus on Black remix theory. We need to talk about how sometimes African people take things from Europe, whatever ideas it is, religions too, and then we reverse and try to look at what they do and then try to find the Black version of what the white people do so we can keep the white paradigm or the white religion or the white ideology. And I feel like that's
okay. Zach, I gotta kind of.
My bad.
Thank you. So Roberta, are you able to speak, Roberta? I saw a hand up.
Does that charger work now?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you, Sister Roberta. Do you have a specific individual question or a group question?
Well, I was when they were talking about the science and the theory, I think he answered it in between my one to ask the question, because it kind of triggered in my brain the whole debate, because one of my degrees is in science, the other is in humanities, but my understanding of how the Europeans made a mockery of the Dogons way before they documented and accepted that what they practiced was correct in the first place. And they still couldn't understand where that science came from. But the brother he did answer the question, although it took a while to get back, because he had discussed that in the very beginning, which I was very pleased to hear him talk about it. So I think my question got answered in the answering of the several questions the young gentleman asked before.
Okay, all right. So thank you, Roberta. Thank you. Wahida, you have a question, and then
Hello.
Wahida.
Yes. Yeah. I think my question is just simply that: is it possible that objectivity, as Brother Asar is discussing it, was indeed something that Africans invented, created, and utilized, but that's the way that we derive the truth? It's just one of the ways that we do that. I think if you look at the prompt. The question is objectivity the African way? Clearly, there's plenty of African people who derive particular conclusions that weren't based on some sort of utilizing certain instruments and things that were unbiased. But I feel like they're both things. I feel like the question is, even if objectivity is something Africans utilize, the final answer and the final analysis we make may not be 100% reliant on that objective findings that they made. That's my question. Is it possible that even if objectivity was created by Africans, we don't rely solely?
Wait, Wahida, you're kind of fading out for me. I'm not able to hear. I don't know if it's the same on Asar and Zach's end.
Yeah, I couldn't hear her.
Sorry. I'm in a store. I'm out. Can you guys hear me now?
Yep, perfect.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
I can hear you.
My question is simply, even if the way Brother Asar is describing objectivity and discussing it, isn't it possible that Africans utilized objective methods, but didn't rely solely on objectivity to derive their conclusions, or to draw their conclusions and base their answers upon? So I was listening to him talk about how there's plenty of examples in African history that tell us certain methods that were used, and he's saying that they were objective and unbiased and eliminated any personal emotions and very specifically wanted to extract the truth of the matter. So I understand that point, and I would rather agree with that. But my question is, even the prompt is objectivity the African way? That's the question you guys are asked. So my question is, if Africans, even if we created this, is it just one part of how we derive our conclusions?
I would say that African people use a variety of ways to come to conclusions, and even in modern research, we say buzzwords like multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary to utilize different methods to answer a whole type of a whole research question. And so what I'm sharing on the screen right now is from Plato in his work Timaeus, describing having a conversation with an Egyptian priest who was talking about how they came to know what they know. And so and the Plato says in the text regarding the Egyptians, as for the and this is what the priest is telling him, as for the intellectual life you observe, no doubt, what care the law among us, for the Egyptians, devotes to it, beginning with the first principles touching upon the universe. Our law has organized all discoveries down to divination and medicine, whose concern is health. From speculation about divinities, it has derived human applications and supervised the acquisition of all other knowledge generated therefrom. So their initial impetus was the discovery and the details of the concept of deity. But from that initial, inquiry into the deities, they discovered certain other things about the natural world, and it's from that which it came out. So what you come to find is that they kind of mix the objective and scientific method stuff, and then they'll have the spirituality and religious stuff mixed in it. So they'll analyze, for example, in a health context, they will analyze the body and look at the symptoms and things. But then in the process of prescribing medicine, they'll also tell you to do this and put this on your altar, and make this sacrifice to this deity, in conjunction with the medicine. So they live side by side. But and so I think that helps to answer your question, at least in one context, that we have records in ancient Egypt.
Can I ask a question? I can't raise my hand, Tristan.
Sure. Shoot.
All right. So actually, this is 2 parts for you, Brother Asar, and I'll start with the latest, because when you just brought up Timaeus, right? I kind of would problematize the assumption that the two exist side by side, right? The natural versus the spiritual, versus them existing as a complete whole. Because when you read that particular essay by Plato, Timaeus, one of the things that it says is that the danger in providing people this knowledge, right, in a compartmentalized manner, where they don't have access to the full scope or breadth, both the spiritual or both the seen and the unseen. Because if they only have the seen and it's devoid of the unseen, essentially they could produce calamity or chaos, like on the earth. So I wanted to push back on that statement, because I'm also familiar with the text Timaeus. But the second thing, the question I really have for you is that when you say that spirituality is objective, my question is, how can that be when the medium by which spirit interacts with us on this earth has to be a physical medium, right? It has to be a vessel. And that, okay. So Brother Asar wasn't in for my question. I just let him back into the room. Brother Asar, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
How much of my question did you get or miss?
I missed it all. So I don't know how long it was, but
no. I'll just repeat. The first point I made was just related to Timaeus, because you stated that they exist side by side, and I wanted to just push back on that and say that the two exist as a complete whole. And actually, when you read into Timaeus, they talk about the danger of kind of like compartmentalizing the knowledge, because they were making the argument that if this knowledge is given to someone incomplete, it can be used for chaos and calamity. And I'm paraphrasing, but I'm pretty sure if you read Timaeus, you know what part I'm referring to. But the question that I had for you dealt with your assertion about spirituality being objective. And essentially, how can spirituality be objective if it has to express itself through a physical medium? Meaning, if you go to see the Babalawo or whoever you go to for interpretation, that person that becomes the medium between you and spirit by default makes it so that what you're getting is no longer objective, if we're arguing that spirituality is in fact objective.
Okay, now I don't argue that spirituality is objective. Spirituality is a system of beliefs, of ritual, of relationships between people, of processes of translating thought into experience. It's beyond simply consulting spirit. I was speaking specifically in terms of the human being consulting spirit and why they would consult spirit. The belief is, first and foremost, that spirits exist. And secondly, that these spirits have more knowledge about reality than human beings. And 3, that these are, for the most part, truthful, unless, you have a system that has like a trickster or a devil type figure, saying in it. But in general, those are the spirits that they wouldn't be consulting, for answers anyway. But the belief is that they would provide an objective view and send, and suggest something that would lead to prosperity in one's life. And so it's not so much the medium. Now we can argue that the medium who's translating, from spirit to the human, he himself is biased. But as I can tell you, as a priest in the Congo tradition and also a practitioner in the Ifa tradition, when we're doing divinations, we are required not to to say anything other than what the Odu says. So if I do an Odu for you and it drops, and this is the understood, meaning of the Odu that has dropped when we're doing the divination, I can't, not tell you information or tell you something extra than what is said. I am just, I'm not there to judge the person in front of me. You have come to me to consult spirit on your behalf. And so, I just tell you what it says. And so I don't try to make a judgment. And so, but I'm saying again, this is just the culture, this is just the practice. As a scientist, I can ask the question, well, what first and foremost, do spirits even exist? What do the Yoruba mean when they say spirit? And what are these particular processes? And try to, discover if, or try to do some kind of experiment to validate the notion of spirit or whatnot as it is defined in each particular culture.
Why do you have to switch between being a scientist and being a babalawo?
Because religion is not science.
They both come out of worldview. So if you have a culture, then that's what I'm saying. Like, they have scientific methods inside of their African traditions.
So if I pour ammonia,
divination.
That's why I asked you the question. If I poured ammonia and bleach in a bucket, what does my worldview have to do with the fumes that arise from their conjunction?
The way you conceptualize and understand the nature, the essential nature of what it is that's coming together. That's your epistemology. That's your culture. That's your it's built into your assumptions. So yeah, it has everything to do with it. So that's why I said the whole thing. When I brought up Shango before.
So how? Give me an example how it is.
And electricity and the electromagnetic.
Let's deal with. That's science. No, let's deal with.
Wait,
I'm sorry.
Point. I didn't catch what Zach was saying about the Shango point.
What I was saying about the Shango point is, the thing is, the relationship between iron and the electromagnetic pulses inside of the human body and human blood, that's what we would call science. But that's not Western science. So there's a different epistemology that is ascendant with a relationship with Shango than there would be if you were praying to Jesus or Karl Marx or some other Yoruba scientist like Hegel or somebody.
Hegel's a philosopher, he wasn't a scientist. But
before y'all respond, I do have a question here. I'm my girlfriend with me. She's been following very closely. I hope this doesn't become an argument weaponized against me. So
I need y'all to argue.
That's crazy.
No. I don't want any of this to be weaponized against me, or I will cut this off.
Wow.
I don't care. I have no. So Sherilyn,
I just came in maybe like 15 minutes ago. But I was a little, I kind of see where Zach is coming from, and I also see where Asar is coming from. But the question that I had is there a difference? Is there a difference in objectivity being African versus African people being capable of objective thought?
Okay.
I would say African people are very capable of objective thought, but that's why I said I think we need to look at the intellectual genealogy of where the idea comes from historically, because otherwise, because African people are capable of all kinds of things. But the problem is, just because we're capable of it doesn't mean we should do it, or it doesn't mean that it would be beneficial to us or to our objectives. Something external, something alienated from you.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Is there a difference in objectivity being okay? Is there a difference in objectivity being African versus African people being capable of objective thought?
I don't think so. I think they're kind of one and the same, because we got to remember that even the concept of African is European, because we didn't put those borders there, and so even the nature of what is African is a Eurocentric question. Matter of fact, Diop argues that the Middle East is just Northeast Africa. And so if that is the case, if we go by our great ancestor Diop, anything that comes from the Judaic traditions, and the Islamic traditions are African traditions. Now, a lot of us would say that that's not African. It's subjective. We can move the goalposts any kind of way we want. But objectivity itself is already a part of African traditions, and it's not a part of some African traditions. As I was saying earlier, before I was, getting interrupted, Africa is not a monolith. There's no one way to be African. And so even the way that the question is even worded shows the limitations in terms of our conceptualization of what it means to quote unquote be African. And so, the idea of an African didn't exist before 1884 and Europeans carving up and naming the continent. And so, this is something that has to be, there's even no definition of what it means to be African or any indigenous names, for, saying the group of people itself. So, it's, that's why I like to have a sign, like I like to define things so that we operate from an operational definition, because a lot of times we have these conversations and we don't define stuff. We just use our intuition and assume that, what we're saying, everyone understands, and either what we're saying or how we define it are even valid constructs in the first place. And this is something that a lot of us have to grapple with.
Yes. So, thank you. Hope this doesn't get weaponized against me in the future. I'm just hoping, because I'll get upset at both of you. So, wait, can everyone hear me? I feel like I
can hear
something.
you.
Wait.
Oh, my video anymore.
Wait, Zach, say something.
I think he's frozen.
Yeah, Zach is frozen on my end.
For some reason, Zoom takes up a lot of bandwidth or memory when it's on.
Because who's I think Zach just dropped. Yeah, it does. I think we'll give him a moment. So I'm gonna actually probably have to.
Yeah, I think we got to push towards wrapping up here shortly. This definitely has been a very engaging conversation and discussion.
I think I'm gonna do a whole lecture on my YouTube channel on the objective nature of spirituality. The format, doesn't really allow for, an in-depth conversation, but it's a needed conversation. But some citations have to be put, up, and to show folks who aren't necessarily familiar with African, traditions and spirituality in a deep sense, what these concepts are in indigenous modes, and to show that this is not something, as Dr. Wilson had rightly noted, that is, you can exclusively associate with Europeans. And I think that's a wrong way of looking at things and try to make things so simplified in black and white.
Definitely is. Yeah. Let me text him.
I know he had to charge his phone. Did it
Yeah. It might have.
Hey Tristan, we'll just have to wrap up.
All right.
If you want to close, you can. If you need me to close, I can do so.
Oh, you can close. That's all right. That's fine.
All right, family. Thank you. Round of applause for Brother Zach, who is rejoining the chat, and Brother Asar for a very enlightening and engaging dialogue on the issue.
Sorry, I got lost.
Yeah, so Brother Zach, we're just wrapping up here. I'm just thanking everybody for joining us today. If you have not signed up for our listserv to be on our mailing list, I will drop a link to it in the YouTube chat. Sister Wahida, could you do that for us? Just drop a link to the listserv in the YouTube chat. But again, we have a lot coming up for the rest of July, and we also have the RBG Centennial Conference coming up in August. So please do make sure you subscribe to our mailing list. And our next general membership meeting, we will have Dr. Errol Henderson out of the Penn State University will be our guest lecturer. So thank you all. I'm just going to close out in prayer, give thanks to the ancestors for bringing us together for healthy dialogue and discussion. We just give thanks for our health, for our safety, and we just ask for a hedge of protection to be placed around us and our family as we part ways. Ashe.
Ashe.
Everyone, y'all have a good one. Thank you for joining us. Peace.
Yeah, man. Dang, y'all. I dropped off my phone, got hot, and then it said I couldn't